I remember the first waitering job. I was training with this like serious waiter, and he told me that, you better get better waiter shoes than that. And I kind of looked at him like, buddy, I'm going to be here for about a month before I have my own TV show. Okay.
Tom, your dad is an actor.
He is, yeah.
I understand he warned you, in a sense, to stay away from the business, that,
Absolutely,
quote, it would be a terrible
yeah.
life. Did you listen?
Did. Apparently not. I didn't listen. But yeah, he basically said, you never have to encourage people to be in this business, because if they're going to do it, they're going to do it, So he told me all about the pitfalls, and I saw them growing up with him, but I also kind of grew up in theaters and sleeping in the backs of theaters during rehearsals. And so I think it all kind of got in through osmosis, So I ended up coming to it late after college. I was on the athletic path and played hockey in college. So I was kind of going down that road. And then I ended up quitting the hockey team my senior year in college, and I did a play, and the rest is history. Just kind of went from there. Moved to New York after college and started in the theater.
And so with your dad, you saw some struggle. Are there any struggles you're comfortable telling us about?
Yeah, it was always a struggle. He was always sort of a working actor, but, it was always difficult. So I saw that firsthand, and it's like, finances are always hard, and, it's like, moving around. And so, yeah, I saw that it wasn't an easy life when I started going into it. So, yeah.
Do you think working for a company for years, that would also be a difficult life? And some people are not made for that.
You mean not in the business? You mean like outside of it, like an office job?
Right.
Yeah. I think that's got its own, struggles and things, but it's a more stable life, where the next paycheck is coming from and that kind of thing. So I think, people that don't want to be gypsies all their life and be an artist, probably kind of go to that more stable life. But yeah, I think all avenues have their own pitfalls and struggles too. Yeah.
Do you view yourself as a gypsy artist?
I still do. Not as much as when I was in my 20s in New York. I would, bounce around from sublet to sublet and, go do a regional theater production of a play. And I worked with a theater company there, All Seasons Theater Group, where I met a lot of my collaborators and friends that I still work with today. And we used to do, evenings of one-act plays and, shows and readings. And so it was just sort of my, kind of birthed me into the theater world.
What are your thoughts on the balance between having a day job and being an artist?
That is something that I've kind of done every day job there is, I think, in it. I started out waiting tables, and really naive about the business. I remember the first waitering job. I was training with this like serious waiter, and he told me that, you better get better waiter shoes than that. And I kind of looked at him like, buddy, I'm going to be here for about a month before I have my own TV show. Okay. So I didn't quite realize what I was getting into. But yeah, so I've waited tables, I've bartended, I've, done temp work. I was a yoga teacher for a long time. So I think that it's just finding something that can sustain you while you pursue your dreams, pursue your art. But there was a guy in New York who once told me, don't fall in love with your day job. Like if you get like the best bartending gig in New York, you're never going to want to leave it to go to a play or go to auditions or, so you never want to have a great day job, survival job.
So a little bit of pain is good, it sounds like, in the job department.
It's just you don't want to get the most incredible survival job because then you're not going to want to go and leave it. And, you have to be able to drop those jobs in a heartbeat because you might get a play or you might have an opportunity to go do something in the field that you're pursuing. So you want to be able to kind of drop those at a moment's notice.
Yeah, I like that advice. That's
Yeah.
good. What have you learned about making money as an artist?
Not enough. Yeah, I mean, that's always the thing. It's like you want to make your art and make it the way you want to make it, but it is also a business and it's a marketplace, and you have to kind of see where what you do fits into that, because if you're just a total artist and you just don't pay any attention to the business, you'll be making stuff for nobody. So I think you really do have to take the audience into account and see what's out there, see what's selling, and see a way that you can find that balance between being an artist and being marketable and selling your stuff, and seeing what you do well that sells in this business.
Well, a lot of people talk about the term sellout, and
Right.
I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing,
Yeah.
having come from not a lot of money, so I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, but I know it gets a negative rap. So have you ever gone on an audition or something where you knew this isn't really your shtick, but you know that it might pay the bills?
Sure. I mean, I think, yeah, it's like that old saying of like one for them and one for you, that kind of thing. I think all artists have to do that on some level. Even Brad Pitt is doing that to a certain extent, so it's like finding that balance is what this is all about, I think.
Is that something that's very important to you, also being in the maybe metaphysical yoga community, balance?
Totally. Yeah. And just finding sort of peace in my day-to-day life is something that I really value. So it's like not overscheduling, not, getting in things that are way over my head and stressing me out. And, my wife always jokes that I always try to schedule one thing a day, so I don't have to rush to the next thing, which sometimes obviously you can't do that. But, to a certain extent, scheduling in enough time that I can take my time getting to the next place, so it's not stressed out and running everywhere,
That being said, though, have you changed in the car and,
Sure.
I mean, the whole actor sort of life?
Yeah, I think definitely when I was younger too, I think that kind of gets old as you have been in this business for a while. So, yeah.
Why do we as creative people squander money? We seem to be reckless with our finances. Or is that a fallacy? We're actually smart with them.
Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily true of all artists that I know. I think I've known some artists that are really good with money. But I think, it's like that sort of those generalizations do come from some kind of truth. I think that when you're focused on being an artist and living this kind of life, you're obviously not prioritizing making money. So it's sort of that left brain, right brain thing. But I also feel like that's a story that we kind of tell ourselves sometimes, like, oh, I'm an artist, so I have to be a mess with money. But I think that you can change that story. And that's something that I've definitely been working on as an artist, because I want to have more money. I want to have nice things in my life and still be an artist, and I think that is definitely possible.
Sure. There's nothing...
Yeah.
Health insurance is sexy. Yeah, it's very
Exactly.
important.
Right.
So, but there is that sort of vision of like this Bukowski life,
Right.
where
It was sort of romanticized in those times, and then I think we kind of carried on with that.
Sure. And then he found his own success, and
Sure.
I'll clean it up a bit, but I think he said some of the stuff came too late for him.
Right.
I'm paraphrasing,
Yeah.
but and he had met his own success in many ways, and I think monetarily.
It's like that Donovan song, "Season of the Witch." Beatniks are out to make it rich.
Oh
It's like
yeah,
that.
that's a good one. I like that.
Yeah.
As someone who has voluntarily chosen the artist life, what can you recommend to other artists about finances?
Well, like we're saying, I think you have to find a way to sustain yourself in this life, I mean, if this is the life that you choose, it's like the Letters to a Young Poet quote, if you choose this life, then build your life in accordance with that necessity. If this is a necessity that you're an artist, then you have to build your life around that and find a way to sustain that kind of a life. So I think it's just priorities. I've been in this for a while where I've seen people drop out of it and go into real estate, and they just sort of made that, not that that's a bad thing, but they made that decision that, they wanted a different life and wanted more stability and so I think you're constantly weighing that, as you kind of progress in this life, in this business.
Has teaching saved your career as an artist?
That's such an interesting question. Yes. I think if I hadn't started teaching, I might not still be in this life. I get so much from it. I just taught acting class yesterday, and it's just incredible to have this sort of oasis, this place to go in and just focus on the work and not have to worry about the business and the strike and everything else that's going on in the world, and just to be able to get in a black box theater and talk about acting is so inspiring to me. So yeah, I don't think I've ever thought of it that way, but I think it really has saved my career.
So it sounds like it also feeds you in other ways, not just money-wise, of course, but feeds you emotionally and maybe spiritually.
And so much of directing in this life, as you well know, is trying to get financing for the next project. So I'm not working with actors on a daily basis. So having teaching, I don't even think of it as a day job, but, having teaching in my life, I'm getting to work with actors all the time. And I'm trying to solve problems and figure out how to make a scene work. And I try to create an atmosphere in my classes the same way I create an atmosphere on my sets, of just creating this place where actors can be relaxed and play and solve problems and try things. So I think it's really similar, and it's really good practice. And I've been teaching for so long now that I'm excited to get back on a set with all this teaching experience. I think it'll be interesting just to see how my directing has changed from the teaching.
Do you ever envision that there's a 19 or 20-year-old Tom in the audience that you would be teaching? Do you ever see, I've realized that's so, quote, meta or whatever, but
right.
That you're if you came in, if there was a time machine and you actually came in and you're mentoring a slightly younger Tom, what would you tell him? Or maybe you would just let him do his thing. You wouldn't try to control anything, make him think anything.
So interesting to think about. Yeah, I think I would just do what I do with young actors and encourage him and create a safe space for him to feel comfortable and work. And some of the teachers that I studied with in New York created that for me. People like Wynn Handman and Jane Hoffmann. And it's interesting, I'm reading this new book on the method by Isaac Butler. I don't know if you've read it, but you should check it out. It's incredible. And all of sort of the teachers that I studied with in New York are kind of direct descendants from these, the group theater people. And, my teacher studied with Sanford Meisner and Bobby Lewis and all these people. So it's exciting just to feel that lineage and feel like, oh, I'm a part of something, So, yeah. So I think, I would encourage him and tell him to keep working. That's what I see with a lot of young actors. They just need to do it, because it's not like being a musician where you can just play in your basement by yourself. You got to be in community, and you have to be able to play with somebody and to work.
Well, and even with a musician, don't you have to get yourself booked at clubs or,
Yeah, sure.
Community events or whatever?
Yeah. But at least they can just like pick up a guitar and play, whereas actors kind of need another actor at least.
What do most artists get wrong about staying sharp between projects?
I think one thing I notice is sometimes actors think if I'm doing a lot of self-tapes, that's going to keep me sharp. But I think that's a totally different muscle. So I think, yes, you have to do that stuff and you have to do self-tapes and do business stuff. But I think you also have to be in a creative space where you can just focus on your craft and your art and your work, aside from trying to get a job. But I think sometimes people think like, well, I made 4 self-tapes this week, so, I don't have to, work on my craft. But it is very different. As actors and writers and creative people, that gets back to that idea of balance. We have to, work on ourselves to be free in our work, because a lot of people will have their own sort of personal baggage and stuff that kind of gets in the way and doesn't allow them to play certain characters or be open or free in their work. So, yeah.
What are some things that can help us get free, aside from, maybe meditation or yoga? Are there other things that...
Those are going to be my first
two.
two.
Okay, all right.
But anything, exercise, being social. It's funny, a lot of my private clients have been wanting to work on listening in their acting. And I've been telling them, well, practice that. You can practice that in your life. You can practice that when you're out for coffee with somebody. You can really listen, because I think a lot of times we lead these lives that are so chaotic, and then all of a sudden we want to sit down in our acting work, and now I'm going to listen, even though I wasn't listening the rest of my day, So I think that there are ways to work on that stuff in your life as well.
And putting the phone down.
Exactly. Yeah.
Add coffee with someone.
No, yeah. I think the devices, like having boundaries with that is really crucial. I try to not go to it right in the morning and then have a cutoff at night. And, I think just doing that is really profound. But yeah, you got to limit that stuff or else it just, gets inside your brain and you're not able to be present and, listen and work with someone.
Yeah, I see it very difficult it seems like it's on a spectrum for some people.
Mm-hmm.
I see people driving that I can just tell they cannot stay off that phone, and then others. I've seen interesting people at bus stops with books, paperbacks.
That's nice.
And I was like, wow, that's really cool. That must be some type of resurgence that's coming back. I don't know.
There was something I saw on Instagram, but it was about hot guys reading on the subway or something. So they would take pictures of these like handsome guys like reading on the subway. So yeah.
Oh, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
That's great. That's really funny. Tom, we have a quote from, I believe it's Uta Hagen, and it was on your Facebook page for Scene Study LA. Mm-hmm. And the quote is, "Talent alone is not enough. Character and ethics, a point of view about the world in which you live, and an education can and must be acquired and developed."
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I love Uta Hagen. She's so great. If you haven't seen, there is a masterclass of hers on YouTube. It's like a 2-hour class of hers that you can watch. It's fascinating. But yeah, I think that gets back to being like a well-rounded person in the world is part of the work. I think I see this all the time with actors that I work with, and, they get so obsessed with acting and being a good actor that they kind of forget to live the rest of their life. And, so I think that's sort of what the artist way is about, taking yourself on an artist date, going to museums, and finding the balance of an education, of sort of having fun in your life and enjoying your life, as well as like this business can get so much about like, I got to get the next job and get so obsessed, but we have to find that balance. And so I think that is probably what Uda was getting at.
And then for better or worse, it sounds like knowing about global situations, politics, as toxic as it may be sometimes, but to know that, especially if you're going to play a character.
Yeah.
That's...
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes that can be what's beautiful about being an actor is that, I'm sure Cillian Murphy playing Oppenheimer, having to learn all about the history and it's like as actors, we get to like do that and, let the research take you down these rabbit holes and learn something that you didn't know before. And I think that's kind of the beauty of being an actor. And, I do that a lot in writing too. If I'm writing about a subject that I don't know a lot about, getting kind of lost in that is part of the fun of it too.
Is there a time period you wish you had been born in other than, our current world?
That is so funny. I'd like to have a time machine and just kind of drop in and check out all these, the 20s and the 50s and 60s and, all these sort of decades that I missed. But I don't know that I'd want to have to pick one and be stuck there. I kind of like the one I'm in.
How long did you live in New York City?
Oh my God. I got there in 95. Yeah, so I lived there for like maybe close to 20 years. Yeah.
What makes New York City the greatest city in the world?
I think I really believed that for a long time. But I mean, I love New York. It's really exciting. I think that you're kind of thrown into it with everyone. And so it's like, all different economic levels, all different types of jobs and all different kinds of people, ethnicities, and you're all kind of forced into living together and dealing with each other in a way that I think other cities don't really have that. And so, I think that's what I loved about it. I loved just going for like long walks in New York and just people watching. And I found it really inspiring as an artist to just walk the streets and see how the light hit the buildings and the fire escapes. And it's just a very inspiring place just visually. Not to mention the characters and the people, and I would keep a notebook and just write down conversations that I heard in a diner and, use that in something I was writing. And so I think it's a really inspiring place, or it was when I was there. I don't know what it's like now. I haven't been there in a while.
And they have bodegas?
They do have bodegas.
I did not know what that was.
There's always a cat in the bodega too.
Oh,
they have like the bodega cat.
It's good.
Mm-hmm.
Catches vermin.
Yeah, exactly.
What was the inciting incident to get you to Los Angeles?
That's good. The inciting incident was I had gotten married and had been in New York a long time, and my wife and I had just made a web series called Ohm City that we were shopping out here. And so we both just felt like we needed a change. She had been there for a long time as well. She had gone to NYU, and we're both artists and filmmakers and writers, and we had just kind of done the New York thing for a while and needed a change. And it was also after two of the worst winters in, recent history. So said it might be nice to get a change with some weather, which all of my New York friends don't understand. They say like, it's just weather. It's like, yeah, weather has a real, impact on your day-to-day happiness.
Yeah.
But the New Yorkers don't want to hear that.
What was the culture shock you went through once you came to LA?
If
you did.
I had visited pretty often and really liked the West Coast, so I didn't feel like I went through a real culture shock. But my wife hadn't driven in a while. And so she kind of had to relearn to drive in LA, which is a crazy place to do that. So, yeah, so that was interesting to kind of navigate that with her. But yeah, it's a very different kind of life, and in a lot of ways, it's easier just in day-to-day tasks. I think New York, if you just have to do your laundry one day, that can be exhausting. It's like a lot just to do anything. It's a lot of energy, and so I think LA was a nice change for us just to kind of relax a little, even though we're in Hollywood, which isn't the most relaxing place.
Was it the right move?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a book, Marilyn in New York, something like that, where she did the opposite.
Yeah.
She came to New York City and just felt like she could be herself and, talk about ideas. And of course, different time, and it's Marilyn Monroe, but.
Yeah, and I think I get that question all the time from people I work with and students, and, should I go to LA? Should I go to New York? Should I be here? Where should I be? And I think it's just, you have to find a place where you like the life and set up roots and find a community that you can work with, and that has similar sensibilities, and just do your work wherever you are. I think sometimes people get caught up in like bouncing back and forth, and then you're not really finding a community in either place because you're kind of going back and forth all the time, and the casting directors in New York think that you're in LA, and you know what I mean? So I think it's just about finding a place where you like the lifestyle and really kind of setting up shop there.
Do you like being part of a community? I mean, I know some people, they like being sort of on the outskirts, on the fringes, and just kind of dabbling in communities and then dipping out. Do you like to be part of something?
I do. I think it's funny, again, getting back to like, we have all these stories we tell about ourselves, but I think being an only child and, being sort of the artist type, I think I have a story of like, oh, I'm a recluse and I like to be alone and solitary. But, then when I'm in community, I really love it. I love the community of my acting class. I love the community of my collaborators in the film world. And but it's like anything, you need a little of both. You need community and you need solitude.
How was moving to LA the right move for you?
I think I had just, I mean, first of all, I think New York is a young person's city. I think, once you hit your middle 30s, it kind of gets a little old. For me personally, it's my opinion. But I needed a change, and I think change is good, and it's expansive, and you meet new people, and you find a new collaborators and new artists to work with, and people in film and theater, and so I feel like my world has really opened up since we moved out here.
And how was it the wrong move?
How is it the wrong move?
Right.
I don't think it was the wrong move. Yeah.
You said a young person's city. Do you think a performer needs to be around younger energy to feed them? I mean, and it's not like you're ancient by any means, but I mean, you're still young, yeah. Well, but do you think that that's sort of a fallacy that is where an actor, an artist, they need to be around that young energy that's always changing and new trends?
I mean, I think there's something to that in this life. When I was in my 20s in New York, and we had this theater company, and the artistic director, wonderful producer who just passed away recently, John McCormick, he was probably only 10, 12 years older than us, but he seemed like the old guy. And I kind of get why he loved being around all of these young people in their 20s, excited and dreamers and artists. And there is an energy to that I feel from my classes, and I think that there is something to that, that it does keep you young in a way.
Right. Less baggage
Yeah.
for your...
Yeah, it's like you can get sort of bitter, and then not you.
No, never.
But one can get
Sure.
sort of jaded and bitter, and it's nice to remind yourself of like why you love this and why you want to do it.
Yeah, I think that's so important, whatever it is, because I think any industry you can get bitter and tired and to really check out. And you'll see that when you're younger. You'll be like, I don't want to end up like that person. And then you kind of go, oh, I know why that person was that way.
Right.
But yeah, it's interesting to try to be like, well, we did this because I liked it.
Yeah.
And that's important.
Yeah. I think you have to constantly remind yourself, and that's what seeking inspiration is all about, is just that constantly reminding yourself like why you love it.
How is creating work in Los Angeles different from New York City or New York area?
Another good question. I think that's hard to answer in a way, because I feel so different out here, having sort of gotten older, and I think like I said about New York, it's like you have so many people in such a confined space, and when you're younger, everybody wants to work for free and help out, and so it is kind of easier. And then I think getting a little older and moving out to LA and having things more spread out, and I think it is more challenging, but I don't know if that's to do with New York and LA, or that's to do with getting older, or so I think it's a difficult one to answer. Yeah.
I mean, there are parts of LA, like when I came here, North Hollywood, it wasn't NoHo,
Right.
What it is now. It wasn't as trendy. And now I see it, and it's quite packed in. There's a lot of people.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, yeah, I think it's, you find your people no matter where you are, I think, and we found ourselves when we got out here finding a lot of transplants from New York. I think we were kind of drawn to that energy. So yeah, I think once you find your people and you all have sort of similar interests, you can make stuff anywhere.
And you find your people how? Classes?
Yeah, just doing stuff. I say all the time, I mean, it's easier if you're younger, obviously, but you can do it as an older person too, of just getting involved in stuff. And whether that's classes or helping somebody make a short film or whatever it might be, just constantly meeting new people and working on things. And I think that's how you make connections. Yeah.
How do you begin writing a screenplay?
Different ways, I think. Sometimes it comes from, one of the scripts I'm working on now came from an article I read in the New York Times about the first woman to play boys high school hockey in the state of Minnesota. And I just was like fascinated with that story. And then I got in touch with the writer of the article. And then I ended up interviewing the woman who did it, her name is Maddie Rooney, and she went on to be the Olympic gold medalist, women's ice hockey. And so I got to talk to her and her high school coach, and I just kind of went down this rabbit hole from reading this New York Times article. So that was how that one started. Other times, like we're talking about with New York, it starts with a conversation. I'll hear two people talking at a diner, and I'll write the dialogue down and then just sort of imagine their lives. So I do a lot of daydreaming, a lot of, so I love like sitting in coffee shops. And I think, we were talking earlier about the devices. I think that's the one thing that, is detrimental to writers, is we need time to daydream and imagine. So I think that, too much time on the devices can hurt the imagination.
And going back to the women's hockey story, what was it about, like why did you feel compelled to then, I have to write a screenplay about this?
It was just such an interesting article, and it was inspiring to me because she left the women's team in high school, and they had almost won the championship the year before. So I imagine that, all her friends on the women's team probably were mad at her and disappointed, and, and then the boys sort of, on the outside, it seemed like they were accepting to her, but I'm sure there was, some pushback with that too. And there was also an interesting storyline of like the father of the boy goalie that she beat out, going to the coach and, starting a ruckus in the town. It just felt like, as soon as I read the article, it felt like a story to me. So I just kind of, again, you just let your imagination kind of run wild with that and what these people's lives are like. And you get ideas from talking to people. I got ideas from talking to the actual people, but then it becomes something else in your imagination, and you just let that run wild.
This was a small town?
Yeah, it was a small town. It was like a Minnesota sort of hockey town, But then I took that and sort of put my life into it and set it in Massachusetts, where I grew up. And so it's like you're taking aspects of things that really happen and then using your imagination and using yourself and putting that into it as well.
And you've yet to film that, correct?
No, still looking for financing on that one. Most of my time is looking for financing.
Your personal writing process, is this the same that you teach your students?
That's interesting. Yes and no. I think I share with them my process. So sometimes in my writers group, people will talk about, we kind of start by going around and people talk about blocks they have or what's going on in their writing this week, and I'll offer things from my own process. But I think it's different for everybody. So it's, but I definitely get so much out of it myself for my own writing, because you're constantly hearing about other people's stories, and I'm trying to help them with something in their story. And I'll notice that, and I have nothing at stake in that. So it's much easier when it's not your script to work out the problems and do things. And then I'll help somebody with their script, and then I'll go back to my own script and say like, oh, I should try something like that in my script. And, so I think teaching it really helps me with my own writing process for sure.
What are some of the writing lessons that took you the longest to learn?
Structure, for sure. I think I sort of avoided it, and I never wanted to do structure because I wasn't formally taught, and I kind of came to writing, in that romantic Jack Kerouac kind of way of stream of consciousness and no rewriting, and I didn't want anything to do with structure. And so I came to structure late, but it's such a gift now. And I'm reminded of a teacher of mine that said, your so-called weaknesses can be your places of real power. And that kind of rings so true to me now with writing, because I really thought that was a weakness of mine, so I just avoided it. Like, I don't need structure. What structure? But it's kind of everything. So I think I really love that. So, yeah.
With your students, do you impart that same thing, or do you want them to know structure right away, or do you give them that freedom?
I mean, I'd rather have them know it right away and not have to, wait 20 years like I did. I think, if you can know it right away, it's better. But I understand if, I see myself in them so much, when people are resistant to structure or something. Everybody wants to be unique, and everybody wants to not do something they've seen before. So I think that kind of gives us that avoidance of structure. But, it's in us just from watching so many movies. And so I think you naturally have structure, so you might as well learn it so you can, do even more with it. So I think it only helps.
Truth is best served through fiction. What does that line mean to you?
I love it. I think it was Hemingway, right? Yeah. I think so. It's great because especially when you're writing from your life, just being reminded to fictionalize is such a great reminder. A lot of times when I'm working with writers, they'll say, yeah, but that's how it happened. And that's not necessarily the best way to tell the story. And sometimes making a choice that's different from how it happened. And then I always come back to that quote, truth is best served through fiction. And I think that's true. I think that if you're just writing exactly how it happened and not using your imagination and not making different choices, it's not going to be as strong a story.
I think you said in another interview that, movies, usually the story is kind of neatly tied up at the end, and that life is not like that. It goes on and on and on, and there usually is no resolution.
Yeah. I have such a tough time with endings. I'm going through it now with a script I'm working on. It's just like, because an audience does want a satisfying ending. So I think I constantly battle with that, with not tying everything up in a bow, but at the same time giving an audience a satisfying ending. So I think it's just a matter of constantly trying to find that, staying truthful to what I want to write, but also being aware of the audience. It's like everything we've been talking about. You're not doing it in a bubble. You're doing it to connect with an audience. And so you need to constantly be aware of the audience, I think.
I think, too, doesn't it depend on the genre? So if you have a blockbuster film or an action film, they need a resolution. They need the hero to walk off into the sunset. But maybe an indie drama, we're going to be left wondering what happened, and that's part of the magic of the film.
Yeah. I mean, I think, not that I've written a lot of blockbusters, but I think that's true. But I think even in an indie drama, you want to feel something at the end. You want a satisfying ending. It doesn't mean you have to tie it up like a commercial film or something, but you want to feel satisfied at the end of the film. Yeah.
Do you have any pet peeves that guide your writing?
I don't know that I have any pet peeves. I mean, there's certain things, like I don't like doing things that are too on the nose or telling rather than showing. If I can show something in behavior rather than dialogue, I would rather do that. So I think it's not so much pet peeves, but there are choices that I think about a lot in my writing. And yeah.
What about pet peeves when someone takes your class in terms of writing that you remind people, please have this filled out, or make sure to pay attention to this part?
I mean, I don't like when I can tell that people haven't put the work in or the time. I mean, I totally understand certain things come up, and you can't always be prepared. But I think, it's putting in the work is really everything. So it's, even if you're wildly talented, if you're not putting in the work and sitting down at your desk every day and doing it, then you're not going to be doing the best work. So I think if there is a pet peeve, it's when somebody's not prepared.
Okay, so if, let's suppose I'm a student and I come in and we've worked on the first scene, opening scene or something, and then you can tell that I haven't done the work, what would give that away?
Just if they're kind of BSing their way through it, and because I think we're all taught to, like, even if you don't do your homework, to pretend that you've done your homework, and so, and I know it because I do it. I just thought of a class that I took in college, and it was with this wonderful old teacher, and it was Russian literature. And being a dumb jock hockey player, I would never have read the book. And we figured this out. It was like 8 people in the class around a table. And we figured this out, that if you made eye contact with him and you just nodded and said, like, oh, yes, I thought that too, he would never call on you. But if you had your head down, then he would say, Tom, what do you think? So we just learned how to sort of BS our way through the class. So I think because I came from that and I was never the greatest student in the world, I can see that in my students now. So I say, I know what you're doing.
Okay, so if I brought in something and we were supposed to do rewrites,
Yeah.
and it just really seemed like I didn't spend time rewriting it. It was the same thing I brought in last week.
Yeah.
That's where the giveaway that I was just kind of BSing it.
Yeah. I mean, if you had a reason why you didn't, I mean, I try to keep it really open. Like, you know, people will come in and say, like, I didn't get a chance to do any work this week. I had this and this and this. And that's fine if you're open about it. But I think it's just when people try to pretend like they've done the work when they haven't, you know, that's kind of one thing that bothers me about that. Yeah.
If you were interested in storytelling, you may also like our new book, Story Questions, the sponsor of today's video. It's a story tool that offers you over 1,500 story questions that you can use as story prompts. It's packed with over 40 categories, so whether you are in the brainstorming stages, developing characters, dialogue, or rewriting, it can help you at every stage of the writing process. Think about this statement. Most powerful stories are just great answers to strong questions. We've linked up to story questions in the information section below. Now back to the interview. What's the purpose of dialogue in story?
I think it really develops character. And I think how someone talks is part of who they are. So for me, coming from theater, that was always how I found the story and found characters. And I would start with dialogue and just put two characters in a room and have them talk and figure out who they are and what's their dynamic and what are they interested in and what do they do all day. And so I think dialogue really helps me find the story. And then, you know, of course you have to go in and structure it and trim it and do that all in the rewrite. But I like the characters to tell me what the story is.
Why do you love dialogue?
I love to just let the characters take me places. I think when I'm really writing well, I'm just sort of guiding it, but letting them kind of take it. And then I'll have certain things that I want to do, but I'm not too heavy-handed with where the story's going. And so that's what I love about it, is when the characters surprise me with dialogue and I write something that I didn't think I was going to write. That's really what I love about it.
Do you think East Coast stories are heavily dialogue driven? I mean, there's a lot being said.
I never thought about it. I think just because I come from there, yeah, maybe I didn't really think of it as East Coast or West Coast, but yeah, I think also just growing up in the theater and coming from theater, you know, there's so much more dialogue in plays as opposed to screenplays. So I think coming from that place and now moving into more film and TV, I think my stuff is all very dialogue driven and character driven.
But at the same time, I know you said you like show don't tell.
Yeah.
So if you had to make a choice between some witty dialogue versus just showing a character,
that's always the struggle, right? It's like, oh, but I love this conversation they have. Yeah, but is it moving the story forward? And can you do that in a more cinematic, visual way? I think that's always what I have to remind myself and have to relearn all the time, because sometimes I'll fall in love with my dialogue, but it's not really moving the story forward. So yeah, you're constantly fighting that battle and learning that lesson. I hate that term, killing your darlings, but you know, I think it's true. It's true. You have to, at some point, you know, not fall in love with your words.
When you think of great dialogue, what comes to mind?
I mean, I love Kenny Lonergan. You Can Count on Me is one of my favorite movies. I think he writes great dialogue. Yeah, I trying to Noah Baumbach, love his dialogue. So I think, yeah, those were the two filmmakers that I feel like most influenced me in terms of like writing dialogue. And also just plays, playwrights.
Tennessee Williams, you said?
Yeah, I love Tennessee Williams. His dialogue is like so poetic and beautiful. It's there's also a great playwright named Jonathan Mark Sherman he was doing plays with Malapart, which is a theater company that he and Ethan Hawke had together, and that was really influential seeing his plays when I first came to New York, because it's like sometimes Tennessee Williams can be intimidating, if you're a young writer and it's inspiring, but it's also like so far from you. So coming and seeing somebody like Jonathan Mark Sherman, and he was also acting in a play with my dad, so I got a chance to meet him and talk to him and realize like, oh, I could do something like that, So I think sometimes having more of a close connection is even more inspiring.
Did you say you ran into him around town, or?
Well, he's also an actor. He acted back in the early 2000s when I was in New York, and he and my dad were doing a play together, and that's how I ended up seeing a play of his called Veins and Thumbtacks, which is a hilarious play that Malapart produced, I think, in the early 2000s. But seeing that play really was one of the inspirations for me to write. So yeah.
What has writing stage plays taught you about dialogue?
That there's a rhythm to it, and there's it's almost like there's a musicality to it that I think you can almost like close your eyes and listen to a play and still get the story. It's not as visual as film, so you're kind of telling the story through dialogue. And obviously things are happening in a play and there's behavior and everything else, but it's more central to the storytelling than in a film.
Do you think you could turn most films into a stage play?
No, I don't think so.
How about Manchester by the Sea? Is there a way to...
Well, he's a playwright, so yeah. I think Kenny Lonergan's stuff really kind of goes back and forth, like something like Lobby Hero. You could see that as a film, and I think with playwrights it's different, but I always have a hard time with when it goes the other way, when you take a play and try to make a film of it, because I think they never expand it enough, and it always just feels like a play that they're filming, So I think you have to kind of reimagine it, because they're just such different mediums for storytelling.
How can dialogue enhance or destroy narrative?
Well, I know a problem that I have a lot coming from theater is too much dialogue. I think that can sort of slow the narrative down and, again, make sure it's moving the story forward, rather than just falling in love with like, oh, I love this dialogue, I love this scene. But if it's not moving the story forward, then yeah, the narrative can kind of fall apart. But it enhances it, lyrically, and if it's poetic dialogue and there's beauty in it, and it can really elevate. So it's not just pictures you're looking at. There's a poetry and a musicality to dialogue that can really enhance things.
Well, some people are masters at it. Aaron
Yeah.
Sorkin, Woody Allen.
Yeah.
Heavily, dialogue-driven
Right.
films.
Right. Yeah.
But I guess not everyone can pull it off, and maybe if they do, it's trying too hard.
Yeah. I think a lot of times it's derivative, or you feel like they're imitating. But I think if it's like one of those guys that really knows how to do it, there's real masters at it. But it's in the end, it's like all storytelling, right? So it's like, yeah, if the dialogue's enhancing the storytelling and it's compelling, then we'll be into it. But I think sometimes it can sort of weigh it down if it's too much dialogue.
How do you differentiate the voices in your stories?
I don't know. I just let them talk, and the characters will kind of take you places, and they'll have different voices. I don't feel like I'm giving them, I'm going to make this character working class and this character, you know, I mean, sometimes you can do a little of that, but I think if you're listening, the characters will surprise you and they'll have their own voices. But that's really the work of it, is to get to that place where you can really listen to your characters and they'll tell you what they want to say. And that's the magic of it and the fun of it.
So when you've listened in a crowded establishment,
yeah,
can you get a feeling of who these characters are based on this short snippets of conversation?
I can, yeah. And I mean, I love like taking that little snippet of conversation and then like, but I don't really know who those people are. I don't know what they do or where they're going to go after this diner. And so it's like a little inspiration of reality, and then I get into my imagination and I create the character and I create the voice and I do all that stuff. But I love that sort of, you know, it comes back to truth is best served through fiction. You know, it's like, I'm not going to follow those guys all day and write down everything they say, but if they say something that inspires something in me and sparks my imagination, then that's exciting and fun.
What causes dialogue to go flat?
Again, if they're not propelling the story, I think if you're just kind of talking in circles and nothing's happening between the characters, or sometimes dialogue can be, you know, people know how to write really clever, witty dialogue, but there's nothing going on between the characters and it's not moving the story forward. I think that's what can cause it to fall flat.
Is there a scene of a movie that you can think of that's where there's just like this sort of very simple dialogue, but the way it's said is so beautiful that it's resonated with you, it stayed with you?
I mean, the classics are like Casablanca, you know, which I watched. We were talking about that Warner Brothers doc earlier. I found out in that they shot 2 endings to that, where you know, they end up together in one of the endings, and then, you know, which would have totally ruined that movie. But yeah, something like this is the start of a beautiful friendship, you know, that comes to mind. Yeah, you know, I talked about Kenny Lonergan, his dialogue in You Can Count on Me, and Manchester by the Sea, the scene with Casey Affleck and Michelle Williams. So it was like beautifully written and constructed, and yeah, there's just masters at it that can really create something beautiful.
Do you think television has the same type of dialogue, or is it sped up? There's not enough breath in it because we have act breaks and things?
Yeah, I think, I mean, depending on the television, I mean, something like Fleabag, like I love the dialogue in that, you know, but yeah, it's a different kind of writing depending on what the show is. I mean, nowadays, The Bear and stuff like that, it is sort of similar to screenwriting in that way. So the lines are kind of blurred between film and television depending on what you're writing.
What stops an actor from sharing themselves and their work?
Trust. If they don't trust the director, if they don't trust their fellow actors, if they don't feel safe, they will tighten up, tense up. So whether I'm on set or in class, it's just building that trust, making them feel that it's a safe space for them to open up and try things. I think that's the most important thing that I do as a director, as an acting teacher, is creating that space where everybody can relax and play and find different things and try different things.
What if they don't trust themselves? Can you see that versus they don't trust others?
Yeah. You can see them editing themselves. You can see them being self-conscious. But I think, again, that comes back to creating that safe space where you're encouraging them, not like picking out negative things that they're doing, but coming at it from a more supportive, encouraging, positive place, and making, actors are really sensitive creatures, so, and I know, having come from acting, that one little note can really get in your head and throw you off, I have to always keep myself from giving a good note too, because sometimes that'll throw them off. If you say like, oh, I love that moment, do that in the next take, I love that moment where you guys said that thing, and and then the next take you can see them in their heads sort of like, oh, here comes the moment that he loved, and it will never be as good, so that's the thing I have to constantly keep myself from doing, is like being supportive and acting like I like what's going on, but not being so specific that I get in their heads.
You say let actors play. Can you tell us what this means?
Yeah, to try different ways of saying something, to try a improvised line of dialogue, to maybe take a pause before that moment, to connect to their scene partner, to just keep exploring it, so that I'm not getting like 6 takes that are all in the same sort of place, that if it's a angry line, maybe don't say it angry. Maybe, say laugh on one take. Keep trying stuff, So that's what I mean by play.
Was being given freedom important to you when you were taking classes? Let's say in New York City in the beginning. Do you remember teachers that you felt maybe were more controlling versus ones that really let you do your thing and you knew that's what worked? Yeah,
I think there's a whole sort of history of coming back to the method book that I love so much, the Isaac Butler book, but like, Lee Strasberg and that of berating people. And I think that's a long history with acting teachers of that sort of yelling at people and never acting like anything is any good. So I sort of work against that. I don't think that creates an environment where people want to play and try things if they're constantly getting berated. So I think, you don't want to just say everything's great. And so you want to try and be constructive with your criticism, but just not in a way that's too berating or negative.
Yeah, that brings to the mind an article I saw, I think Wall Street Journal, can a boss be good if they yell? Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if the same is for a director, because I was thinking about it, if the boss is then fair at other times, I think you would almost respect them in some sense.
Yeah.
Versus a boss that maybe doesn't yell, but then there's like other stuff that's not, that's interesting. Can a director be good if they yell?
Sure. Lee Strasberg was an amazing teacher, even though he yelled at people. So I think you can be. I think for me, it's getting out of that mindset that a director is the boss. I think there's a lot of ego in directing and teaching, and being in that position, the ego can go wild with that. So I think you have to constantly work against that and be a collaborator. And I don't want to direct unless I have to. If it's going off the rails, I'll give you a note. But if I can just cast really great actors and let them do their thing, great. I don't need to micromanage and direct all the time,
Do you think, though, we need to know who to respect? Sometimes you have to, what's the saying, you have to meet people at their own level sometimes to have them respect you. Do you think we need to sometimes see that person take ownership of the ship?
Yeah, but I think I think you see that in what they want and how they communicate, and I don't think respect comes from yelling at somebody or berating someone. I think you can be respected and be positive and supportive and be collaborative. And I think just a lot of times, probably because of that, like wanting respect, I think directors tend to direct too much. And it's, I think it's in all aspects of the business. Actors love to act and act too much, So I think it's, you have to take your ego out of it and just really focus on the work. And the people that I've worked with that do that, those are the people that I respect. I love when someone says, I don't know what this moment should be. Let's figure it out together. I don't disrespect them for that. I think that means that they're still exploring the moment. They're trying to figure it out with the actors. They're letting something be alive, and I respect that rather than somebody who's gonna pretend they know the answers all the time.
What if an actor can't find the character within them?
That's a tough one. I mean, if it's are you talking about like in a set or in a class, or, because I think that's...
Okay, I mean, I guess I'm thinking of maybe really both. Anytime they're supposed to play something and it's just not giving, it's not coming for you.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I would never direct something that I didn't get to cast, because I think casting is everything in directing. So I've had the luxury of working with amazing actors, so I haven't had that problem on a set. In a class, it's different because you're getting new people all the time, and people are at different levels of experience. I think there's always a version of the character that they can find, and it's their version of the character. So it's not necessarily like, this is the character and you have to like go to the character and become this thing. It's sort of bringing those two things together. Like, I want to see your version of this character, more than like trying to hit some note.
How do you know when to push an actor and when to leave an actor alone?
Well, if they're not getting the scene or the moment in the way that you see it, then it has to be a communication. But I think push is a tough word for me, just because I think if you push too hard, you're not going to get what you want out of that actor. So I think it's really a delicate, it's just a conversation about, I like to ask questions a lot. Like, what do you think this moment is? What are you trying to do with this line? Like, what's your intention here? And because I think sometimes if you push too much, you can push them away.
So it's a pulling, sounds like.
Yeah, it's more of just a conversation of just figuring it out together. Again, rather than it being like, I'm the boss, I know how it should be, and you have to get there. Rather letting it be a conversation of like, maybe it's that vision I had, but maybe it's something else. I always come back to that. I love that line about, you write one movie, you direct another movie, and you edit a third movie. So it's always got to be alive. And if you get too controlling and try to make it something that you wrote 6 months ago in the script, it's not going to be alive and it's not going to be compelling.
You said you had side jobs as a waiter.
Yeah.
Did you work in some hectic kitchens?
Yeah. Talk about yelling and acting teachers. Yeah, chefs can be similar.
Well, I mean, there's an element of show.
Yeah.
It's plate up time and it's dinner time and you've got, patrons that are waiting.
Yeah.
And there's a stress. And so it's similar, get out there. But you're right, that's a push.
Yeah.
And needs to be, obviously. But whereas you're talking about asking questions and pulling, maybe?
Yeah, just having a dialogue with an actor and talking about it. I mean, hopefully that can happen in rehearsal and you have enough time. I mean, sometimes when it gets really stressed and you're losing the light and you got to get the shot, and that's a different story. But as much as I can keep it alive and exploring and finding things, I think that's the atmosphere you want to create. I mean, so many film sets that I've been on, it's just like about like, okay, did we get it? Okay, next thing. It's like, we're not being creative. We're not, exploring things. We're just like getting the shot and moving on to the next thing. And it's like the idea is just to get the day. But then what are you making?
What's the secret to being an actor's director?
That's like the biggest compliment I could ever get. I love when people say that. The secret is, I think, kind of everything we've been talking about. It's creating a space where actors feel comfortable and safe to play and do their work and find new moments and try different things. And realizing that like everything is about, as a director, you're creating the atmosphere on the set. So it's, creating an atmosphere that feels creative, where people feel like they can try things. That's what I would say is the key to being an actor's director.
What if it's an outdoor scene?
Yeah.
And, you have permits and everything, you're allowed to be there, but you just
Permits?
know...
What are those?
You just know you're working against elements.
Yeah.
And how much freedom are you giving someone in those moments?
Yeah, I mean, what you're trying to do ideally is to keep all the stress sort of away from the actors. So, you have people whispering in your ear like, yeah, we have 20 minutes to get this scene done and we have 6 more setups and, but you don't want the actors to know that, So it's like you're constantly trying to shield them from all the stress of a movie set so that they can feel creative and like they can have the time to try things.
So it's almost like you're a parent, and yes, there is a Santa Claus, Virginia.
Yeah.
You don't want them to know you're shielding them, giving them a safe bubble.
I mean, sometimes, yeah. I mean, sometimes it's also good to say like, look, we have about 4 takes of this. So just to let you know, because otherwise they might be in rehearsal mode for the first 2 takes, So I think it's just, again, finding that balance between letting them know what's going on, but not letting them feel like the stress of the movie set, because sets are stressful.
You say you trust your actors.
Yeah.
What if there's one you don't totally trust? How do you build it?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's all casting. It's like, but I'm trying to think of an example. I really have been lucky with the actors that I've gotten to work with. But there are certain things that you realize about actors that, because I like to do a lot of improvisation. And I remember on my second feature, Gaby Hoffmann, who's a wonderful actress, came in for like a week or I forget, maybe a few days even. And, we had been improvising a lot and I told her like, oh yeah, just improvise. And she was like, what? And she was resistant to that and didn't want to do that. So I think there's times when certain actors, especially if they haven't been with the production the whole time, they come in and they have a different way of working. And I think you have to be open and sensitive to that and find a way to incorporate everyone in and make them feel like they're part of the company, but at the same time get what you need from each actor. Yeah.
Can trust be turned on, or does it really take time to manifest? Or sometimes it's just not, it's like chemistry, it's either there or it's not?
Yeah, I think it has to be built. I think it has to develop, and like hopefully through the casting process and the rehearsal process that you're building that trust the whole time, and then by the time you're shooting you have a trust with the act, because if there's no trust between the actor and the director, like you're in trouble. You're not gonna, because they're just gonna be resistant and pushing back, and that's not a creative atmosphere, and you're not gonna get a good movie.
Even if a scene calls for tension?
Well, that's different. That's different, and then you're playing a certain scene, and there's tension in the scene, but that's different from not trusting your director. Yeah.
How do you help an actor that does not like to watch themselves?
Don't let them see the monitor. I mean, there are certain actors who fight to see it. But yeah, I think those actors that don't want to watch themselves, they don't have to. They don't have to see the dailies. They don't have to, you just kind of work with them almost like you're doing theater. And you work with them on the character and on what they're playing in the scene. But yeah, they don't have to look at the monitor.
Shouldn't an actor want to see themselves eventually, to give themselves feedback?
Yeah, I mean, I think in this day and age now, especially with young actors, with all the self-tapes that they have to do, and I mean, I find it very helpful. I think what you have to do is you almost have to like disconnect from, oh, I hate the way my face looks in that, and just look at it constructively and make it about the work. I remember when I acted in Fairhaven, my first feature, and we were editing, I had to like just start to call myself by the character name and just disconnect from it, so I wasn't like getting too self-conscious, and just be like, well, what's the beat of this scene need to be? And so yes, I think it is very helpful to be able to watch yourself, but I think you can't make an actor do that. But hopefully, you know, they can disconnect enough and see themselves constructively and learn from it.
That's interesting. So you're almost like it's not Tom. That
Exactly.
was someone
Yeah.
else right there.
Well, I had to learn that too. I kind of, because that was my first time in an editing room, and I just had to, because for the first few days I couldn't even look at myself. So yeah, I just had to eventually just be like, well, I have to edit this movie, so I have to get this done. So you just kind of disconnect and make it about, that's a character in the movie, and I'm gonna, you know, make this the best I can.
How do you help two actors work together who don't have chemistry with one another?
Oh God. I would never cast two people that didn't have chemistry. That would be terrible. But yeah, in class situations, just by being open to the other person and working with them, and not doing it some prepared way that you did in your bathroom mirror, like work with the other actor, because I think chemistry is just being open to the other person and taking what they're giving you, and that might be nothing, and then there's got to be a response to that. So yeah, that's difficult though, for sure.
Right, because maybe there is a tension that's
Yeah.
not said, and then you pull both actors aside separately, have the other one going back, and then you say, you know, Tom, what's going on here? Like,
Yeah.
how come you're in this scene with this person? And how do you really? I mean, do you ever ask someone like, how do you see this person, or how do you feel about them? And maybe then they can develop more for that character.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had that situation. I think that's tough. I try to let them have their own dynamic and not get too manipulative and too involved. And, you know, I watched a Criterion commentary, and they needed like a baby to cry on the cue, and they like pinched the baby. You know, it's like that. It's like you hear those like horrible stories about manipulative directors. So I try not to do that stuff. But yeah, I think letting actors find it and giving a little assist where you can, and, you know, but not being too micromanaging and controlling.
Why is it so hard for indie dramas to make money?
I wish I knew the secret to that one. I think it depends on the story. I think it's hard because comedies are so marketable, because, you know, everybody after a long, hard day wants to sit down and laugh and see something light and you know, have a good time. I think it's, you know, I'm doing it all the time with my wife at home. We're scrolling through things. We're like, oh, that looks really interesting. And, you know, we'll say like, yeah, but it's so intense looking. Like, do we really want to get into that tonight? Let's just watch something lighter, you know? So I think comedies are easier. Dramas are more work and can be intense and bring up a lot of feelings. So I think you have to be ready for that as an audience. But if you make something compelling and there's comedy in it, you know, I hate that distinction. I think like I like to do dramas with comedy so that there are light moments in a drama, you know, because I think that's how life is. You know, it's life can be totally dramatic and then hysterically funny in like the next moment. So those are the movies that I love, and those are the movies that I try to make.
Can you talk about the obstacles you faced trying to sell two independent feature dramas?
Where do I begin? Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, just to get a distribution deal, for sure, having recognizable actors is a help, but it has to all be there. It has to be a compelling story. It has to look good. It's to be shot well, to be written well. It has to have great performances. And I think if you have all the elements come together, then, you know, it's not always difficult. But it's also, you know, you have to go to the right festival and get it seen. And sometimes that's hard to do. So yeah, I mean, there's a ton of obstacles. So you really have to love what you're working on, especially as a director, because you're going to be with it for years. So, I mean, I'm always telling directors, like, if you don't love this story, don't make it, because you're going to be with it for years. And you're going to be pushing it up the hill, and you're going to be marketing it, and you're going to be trying to sell it. And but if you love it, then it's all worth it.
Did both your features screen in a theater, or did they?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Luckily, it was funny when we made those. It was 2013 and 2015. They were just starting that sort of day and date thing where they kind of used the theatrical as promotion for the streaming, you know, so they could charge more on Amazon if they, you know, have a theatrical. So I think we kind of came along at the right moment to get a theatrical, because it's nice to see your movie in the big screen.
Can you tell us how you've sold each of your films?
Yeah, through festival screenings. You know, the first one, Fairhaven, was at Tribeca, and we got a really good slot. I think having Chris Messina and Sarah Paulson and Rich Sommer and Alexi Gilmore and people like that in the cast really helped us get a sort of prime screening spot. And so then you get a lot of buyers that come in, and then you go down the list, and a lot of people pass, and some people are interested, and you take meetings with those distributors, and you narrow it down. And you know, I was lucky enough to sell 2 features, which, you know, is a win in and of itself, you know. But then from there, it's getting them out there. If it's a small distributor and they're not going to put a ton into the marketing, you know, you're doing a lot of that work by yourself. And now it's changed a lot since then. So now there's a lot of sort of self-distribution going on, and that's another avenue for filmmakers. So yeah, the landscape's constantly changing. And we'll see with the strike how it changes again. Yeah.
Do you think that if you were a horror filmmaker or in another genre, that you could make more of a living being an indie filmmaker?
Yes. Yeah, I think so. Because it's just those movies sell. People love the horror and to be scared. But I've never liked horror movies. I've never want to be scared like that. And it's just not my thing. So sure, I think if you try to do that, because I've had things like that, like, oh, well, what's the horror movie that I could make that, you know, but it's like if you kind of force the square peg into the round hole, it never really pays off. So I think it's about looking at the landscape of film and seeing what's out there and selling that I can do. And so my sort of answer to that was like, oh, I love doing romantic comedies. So that's something that can sell. So I could do an indie romantic comedy. So I think you're constantly kind of looking at the commercial and the art that you make and seeing where those two things can come together.
Where are your films currently? Like what platforms?
That's a good question. I mean, they're all over the place. I think Amazon, my second feature was on Netflix for a long time, but that's no longer on there now. You know, what are all the, I should have that answer right on the tip of my tongue, but you know, it's on all the major platforms.
Was it on Tubi at any point?
Yes.
Oh,
I think
great.
it still is on Tubi.
Oh,
Both
okay.
of them. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Will you continue to make dramas?
Yeah, I'll always make dramas with comedy. I think comedy, drama, I think I'll make movies that have a heart and are funny and are dramatic. Yeah, that have dramatic situations. So, yeah, those are the kind of movies I like. I mean, we talked about Kenny Lonergan, those kind of movies. But I think like his movies are hysterical. Like the Manchester by the Sea had some really funny moments in it, even though it's like a real drama and dark.
Do you think you could make an indie sort of a relationship film, but maybe more family friendly, and then try to market it to a streamer that you might end up making more money on and continue to do that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I've gotten notes like that on this hockey script that I was talking about. People are like, well, you could do like the more Disney Mighty Ducks version of a hockey movie, you know, and so, yeah, I think, you know, it all comes back to what we've been talking about today of just finding that balance. Like, I don't want to do a total Disney movie, but I might be able to like make more of a PG-13 version of my hockey movie and make it more sort of marketable. So yeah, I think you're constantly trying to find ways to do that in this business.
Is that something though that's really in your heart? Because it seems like you like more, you know, sort of truthful, gritty, you know, maybe doesn't have to have a pretty bow on it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I love to do. I love to make, but you also gotta make a living.
And there's nothing wrong. I mean, there's a whole, you know, I'd gone to the Lifetime channel and I was really fascinated by some of the new spins. It had been a while.
Yeah.
And they're very salacious topics.
Yeah.
And it's its own brand, and, you know, it's you know, it doesn't have to be Lifetime, but I'm saying, you know,
Right.
in terms of there's a whole section of the population that they'll only watch certain films.
Yeah, I mean, I don't just want to make like art films that nobody sees. So it's like you're always trying to connect with an audience. So I think I'm constantly doing that. Like that was, you know, reading that story in the Times and, you know, girl playing boys hockey in high school and like, you know, that's a sort of marketable idea that I could do. So I think you're just constantly trying to see where you fit into the commercial landscape. And being able to do the stuff that you love to do, but also sell stuff and make a living.